Ed from Voyage Adventure Vans here. Today I'm going to show you our rear door handle location kit for a VW Crafter or M.A.N TGE 2017 onwards. So two questions, I suppose. Number one, what does it do? Number two, why might I want one? Quite simply, to answer the first part, what does it do? It's much more common to see these vans with a rear bed layout, a fixed rear bed layout. Putting a fixed rear bed in a van, if you're maximising the space, tends to put the mattress and the bed up against the back door and then prevents you having access to the rear door handle, which obviously in an emergency might be an issue. Or if you just want to fling the doors open and have an Instagram photo, it stops you doing that without going outside as well. So let's get the important thing straight. We're going to want the Instagram photo first. And then maybe if there's an emergency, we need to get out of the van, then that'll be a second. So most of us, it's the Instagram photo, doors open, looking out at some fantastic view, and show everybody else where you've parked. Or maybe not, because they'll all end up wanting to go there. But joking aside, the rear door handle relocation kit, it allows you to put a new door handle in the upper position and therefore be able to get to it from the bed. This is something that we developed probably 5 or 6 years ago for our Boxer and Ducato conversions, and it was no problem. We could reuse the handle that was located in the normal position and then replace it in the upper position. For the Crafter and the M.A.N, unfortunately, the solution wasn't as straightforward, and it did take a couple of years before we found a suitable handle and modified a suitable kit in order to make installation easy. We believe now that we've got the right solution and are confident enough to offer it to you guys for installations in your own builds, or even if you've got a factory build and you want to relocate the handle, then it shouldn't be that difficult. Let's first of all have a look at what you get in the kit. So in the kit, you get 2 meters of cable. There are tension-in adjusters at either end. There's an adjustable brass barrel connector, and then there's a barrel, sort of barrel nipple, if you like, on this end. We've had an aluminium plate folded, cut, and riveted. That bolts in where the existing handle goes, no modification whatsoever. In order to clamp the handle, we've made our own block here, which is made out of Delrin plastic, which is a structural grade plastic. It's been CNC'd this side from the factory setting, and then this side just clamps over it and allows the adjuster to sit in the middle. We can then get through this hole with an Allen key. So you pop an Allen key in there to adjust the tension, and then the cable comes out of this slot here. This is then clamped together with 4 stainless steel bolts, which you get a spare, because you're probably going to lose one down the bottom of the door or halfway down the driveway. And then we've got a bit of Velcro which wraps around this to stop it bouncing and rattling in the door once you've assembled it, because you do need to allow some slack. We've got 2 different size M4 black machine screws here, which allow you to screw there's holes at the bottom of the handle, and it allows you to screw that into place. There's an M.A.N clamping bolt which just sits in here to stop the cable coming out once we've put it in. And then we've got our template. This matches the upper recess where the handle's going to locate. There's a very small space indeed because of the mouldings in that area, or because of the way the metal is structured on the door. There's a very small area where this can actually sit. So we've determined that this is probably the best area to put it. And the whole idea of the kit is to make it easy for somebody to come along and say, okay, I want to relocate my handle with the least possible pain. It's probably the worst. In the kit is a bunch of ply packers, and the one that you need to use is the bottom one. So that allows for the handle to sit on that way, and it's rebaited to allow for these two holes, which are sort of, they protrude, the mouldings for the holes protrude a couple of mil, so they sit in there quite nicely. And then, depending on your structure, this is, I suppose, the crunch for this, is that the whole concept behind the design was that everybody's going to make their panel slightly different. And whether you've got just a single small panel at the top, where you've got metalwork showing around the side of it, this is probably the minimum amount of paneling that anyone's going to have on their upper door panel. This sits in the recess and will allow you to locate the rest of the handle so that it doesn't interfere with anything. The handle's going to sit in here. So that's where your handle sits. The method to attach this is through these two holes. So it requires a plate, which is in this location. So the plate needs to be there. What I've done is basically make several different thickness plates out of birch ply. So I've got 12mm, 2 9mm and a 6mm. Now, if you would just fit in this panel, then quite simply you lose the 6mm, put these together, put them over the top of the handle, and then by lifting the handle up, you can basically see that there's a couple of mil difference between the bottom of this and the base plate with the inserts in it. That's a 3mm Allen key fitting. So if you were to put that in the bottom, so what you've got there now is the handle sandwiched between the bottom plate and these are the packers. At the moment they're just loose. What I would suggest doing is working out what you're going to do in terms of the thickness of your ply, and then work out how many of these packers you need. At the maximum, that's what you're going to need, because you're not going to want to locate this handle into that recess, because there won't be enough space for the bottom of the handle and the fixings. So the chances are you may have, like we do on most of our conversions, we've got a full ply surround which is then upholstered as well, and it tends to perhaps finish at about 5 maybe 6mm thickness by the time you've got foam scrim and material or vinyl on top of a 4mm ply. So we've probably got about another 5 maybe 6mm on top of this. In order to accommodate that, what I would then do is probably take out one of my 9mm and put a 6 in place, and that would give me an extra 3mm, which is probably about right. So I've given you enough packers to mess around with the thickness here in order to get it just right. Once you've got it just right by measuring it on the door, then I would suggest undoing it and just gluing them all together in a stack. And just dab of super glue is fine. What you don't want them doing is coming apart while you're trying to assemble it and all falling down the back of the door. So what I'm going to do is basically glue these together with a couple of dabs of super glue. You don't need a lot. And I'm just going to try and keep them lined up. I'm going to glue that stack of packers to the back of this piece. So that's now attached, so we've got that located in the right spot. The handle will fit in. the packers are slightly bigger than this opening, and they tend to locate so that they're lined up around the back, sides and here, and then at this point there's a slightly bigger gap there at the front. It's a couple of mil, which will allow you, once you've connected the cable, so when you connect it to the, what you would do, this would be in the van. This cable has been pushed up the left hand side upright next to the hinge, and then you're going to basically feed it through there, and then when it comes out here you can then attach the handle. So there's a slot for the barrel to go in there, rotate it towards the frame, screw that about halfway in, and then just tighten up the locking nut, obviously with a spanner. Then that's located like that. So then you would push this back into here and then allow the front to sort of rotate down, and that couple of extra mil on there stops this getting stuck as you rotate it down. If you've done everything right at this stage, when you lift that up, then the holes will be aligned with the lugs underneath. So that is assembled now, and let's pretend we were on the van. So that could then be, this could be screwed in place, or it could be fitted with panel clips, whichever your option is. As I say, most people will probably have some panel over the top of this, but I would still fit this into the location, probably with a couple of screws. If this is going to be covered, I'd put a couple of self-tappers, you know, at each end and top and bottom. Then that's not going anywhere. So that would be my preference, I think, for fitting that in place. Then, if that was the case, all you would need to do is to locate your panel over the top of it, replicate that hole. The best way of doing that is probably to locate this first, then put a couple of screws poking out the surface from behind, put your panel on, push it so that your panel then gets marked where those two screws are, then align this up with the back of your panel and router out this hole. And I would probably do that before I glue it all together. But I say, I'm showing you the basic. You can go as far with this as you want. I hope in some of the other little clips that I've got, I could show you a couple of the vans that we've fitted with this system, and it's been a bit more complicated. And I hope I've got enough footage that makes sense. Right, the first thing we're going to do is remove the existing handle. Now, for this, you're going to need a Torx 20. Having taken the screws out, you just got to slide it to the right and then drop it down. Now, there's very, very little space behind here, and I would suggest going careful so that you don't put any dents in the outside of the vehicle skin, because it really is an awkward thing to take out. Personally, I find it easier to just get my hand, well, I don't find it easy to get my hand in there, but it's easier to take the actual cable out of the slot while it's in there, so that you're not trying to, or you're not restricted by where the cable is. Plus the back of the cable sticks out the back, so I'll just pop the cable and then pull the locator pin out, and then you can just pull that down. You don't need that at the moment, and then you can proceed to sort of manipulate this around in order to get it out. It's definitely better done before you insulate, because if you start sticking insulation up behind it then pulling this out, you won't have enough space. But you can see why I can't relocate this at the top, because it's just too thick. There's just too much going on. Plus the other problem would be that you would have to put an extension with that cable. So yeah, the problem of relocating or extending this cable all the way up there is that you need an end like this at that end. So if you could buy a longer cable and then use the existing handle some way, that would be okay. But both options weren't possible. So we've taken that out. The next thing we need to do, we need to put the aluminium frame in there. This is the plate that holds the adjuster. It needs this slot to go on this side. So that slot faces the center of the door. So this piece is held in place with 4 of these M4 machine screws. So that's going to locate in that position. What we want to do is attach this into this slot before we put it up in the gap. It just means we're not trying to fight ourselves in this corner in order to fit this. There's like a slot between the 2 plastic mouldings there, and quite simply we're going to just push that into the slot. So we're going to take this bolt with the washers, slide it over there, push it up against the original cable and just tighten it up. Now I will put a spanner on that. I'm not going to at the moment, for the simple reason that this is going to come off after I fitted it for you. So I'm just putting that on. So that gets put on there, tighten that up with a spanner. So that's now located. So now if we put this into place, so just line it up with the original holes, take one of your M4 machine screws, and do that up. Okay, our next step is basically going to be to get this cable up into the upper position. Definitely better if you haven't already stuffed this full of insulation. If you have, you may need to perhaps employ a sort of poking stick. What I would also do at this point here, I would take it over this bar there. So I'm just going to come over there. What we don't want is to create any kinks or really tight bends in this. As long as it flows, then the cable sleeving will do all of the work. So I'm just getting that over there. The cable will then be able to go nicely into the back end of this cable adjuster, and then this is going to follow this route up here and then sort of come out in this location. There's plenty of slack on it so that we've got no issues, with space. So pushing it up here can be a little problematic because you start hitting the hinge bolts. So we've probably got about 2 foot of cable hanging out the top, which is plenty. We can poke some back down, it doesn't matter. So that's the top end of the cable taken care of. So this is the outer template and the packers, which have been loosely glued together. We're going to find this insulation gets in our way a little bit, so I'm just going to, let's take that out for now. So this is going to locate here. So we've got various ways where we can attach a panel in here. I'm doing this on a temporary basis, and it's important you understand that. So I'm just using this one, which is plain, that as we supply it in the kit, and I've glued these packers to the back of it. That's going to go in there, and for the purposes of this van, because we're going to have an outer panel which is going to sit over this. This is going to sit within this rebate, which is almost identical to the thickness of this ply. So having this inside the panel will help later on. So for the purposes of fitting this, I could literally just put a couple of screws that go through into this outer frame or outer sort of metalwork, and that'll keep that there solid. If you were trying to do something with a finished panel and you wanted to finish that, then probably I would go down the route of putting holes in it like this, and then using plastic fittings. So I would probably cover that in vinyl and then put the fittings in there, because you're only pulling the handle, you're not trying to really pull the door with it, you're pushing the door, so that they hold it quite well. But for the purposes of this job, I'm actually just going to use this panel and show you how to fit it. What I need to do is make sure that I put that through that hole on the back. So I'll poke that through and then put this into position. So I'm going to try and balance everything here. So that goes through there, that goes into position, and I'm just going to pop one screw there. See, this is very much temporary at the moment, but I'm just going to put a screw. So that'll do from the purposes of holding that where we want it. So we can now take the handle, basically just connect that into connect the barrel into the holder, and then screw the adjuster about halfway in using a spanner just to nip the locking nut up behind it. That then just gets poked back into there, push that into place. We've then got two black machine screws that we're going to put in. Would be better if I was on a taller step. So that's the upper part of the handle put into place. We're now at the stage where we need to connect these two cables. So for this, the first thing we need is we need the routed part of the cable connector, and then we've got the plain part, which is the same both sides. So the routed part, we're going to get this cable end and then press it into the slot. It should be a reasonably snug fit. That's the first part. The next part is the locator, and for this we need our 2mm Allen key. So I'm just going to slacken that off a tiny bit. You don't want it to pull right off, because if you start fraying the ends, it won't go back on. They're factory ends at the moment, so they should be okay. So that's going to locate in this hole. Push that in the hole. Feed the cable through the slot. So that cable goes through the slot. We then take the outside edge, put that on. Just so that I don't drop it, I'm just going to nip this, I'm going to nip the Allen key up. And now we're going to put 25mm M3 cap head bolts through there. So there's 4 of those to go in position. They should all line up. Sometimes you've just got to give them a little bit of a turn, because they are quite precisely drilled. And these have got a 3mm head on them. I'm just having to give these a slight turn just because the hole's probably a bit too snug. Got some M3 nylocks to go on the back. You've got a spare one because you're bound to lose one on the way. And it's probably not something everybody's got in their toolbox. So 4 of these, and obviously just nip them up with a spanner. I'm just doing them finger tight at the moment. So that's done up. All we now need to do is put a bit of tension on this. Now, To tension it, undo the center Allen key on the adjustable nipple, pull this through, and then just do that up a little bit. Here's one of those jobs that requires 3 hands. But what we found is that if you put too much tension on this, then the van won't lock. Please ignore my obvious mistake, which is basically this should be routed inside of there. It's temporary at the moment, so it is coming off. What we need to do now is test that the door shuts and locks on this. So what we're going to do is basically just test that the door opens and closes from the inside now. We need also to have the remote control whilst we've got the adjustment with us, because what we found is if you tighten this up too much, then although it sounds like it's locking, the back door will still be open. So just be warned that if you put this too tight, the back door won't lock. So you've got to adjust it so that you can open it. So the sweet spot is basically somewhere between opening and not locking. So just keep tightening it a little bit at a time, or tighten it up, try it with a fob. If you can still open it from the outside, just keep slackening it off a bit until when you lock it, it stays locked. So I'm going to shut this. And then try and open it from the inside. So that opened okay from the inside. So I would say safely we are in the right ballpark. Like I say, I haven't got the key with me at the moment in order to test it. I wouldn't want you to close all of this up and then find, like we might have done on one van, that suddenly the door's not locking. So we thought it was all okay, and it turned out it wasn't. So we had to pop this panel back off, adjust it, then put it back. It didn't take more than 5 minutes, but it's an inconvenience. So certainly just double check that, because it is something that will affect it. On a practical note, it doesn't affect the operation of this handle. I mean, this handle is independent of that cable. So this will always work regardless of what's happening to the other handle. However, if you've put too much tension on the new handle, it will definitely not lock with the central lock-in. Once you're happy with everything, basically get this bit of Velcro. At the moment, you see, when you're slamming the door, that can knock. So all we're going to do is put this bit of Velcro around there and attach it like so. And now there's no metal to metal contact. So now there's no metal to metal contact. You should be fine. Okay, what we're going to do, excuse the background noise, but I've got to do this outside. So this is my own van where we've got a previously fitted door card. So I guess this is probably the worst case scenario. I'm not making it from scratch. I'm going to try and adapt what I've got in there. So what we need to do is get this cut out and this piece on the inside up here. So first off, I've got to take this off, take the door handle off. So I'm just going to take all these screw caps off so we can remove the panels. I'm going to leave the bottom panel on whilst I make the holes in this one, because I need that to sit on there and it'll save me any problems lining it back up. Now this panel pretty much fits snug in there. There's not a great deal of wiggle room. So once that's in there, when I fit it, I'm going to have to take some of this insulation out probably. But for the time being, all I'm going to do is screw that into position. Because I've got a much bigger panel covering it, this is just going to be a locator. So this panel is just going to locate the hole on the main panel. But in order to transfer the location from there to the main panel, I'm going to insert a couple of screws from the back pointing out to the front. I'm going to put my main panel on and then push it on so that I get a couple of marks, and then I can use that to line up. And then, crazy as it might sound, I'm actually going to try, this is foamed and vinyled, and I'm going to try to route this shape into this from the back, and honestly that's going to fill me with dread. If it goes wrong, then I got a day's work fixing it. So for this panel, from the back, I'm just going to put 2 screws that are long enough to poke through the front. It doesn't really matter where I put them, because they are just markers. So they're poking through there, probably a bit too much at the moment. I'll undo them a little bit. I don't want them poking right the way through, because it'll stop me lining that up. So that's going to go in that position now, and I'm just going to put 2 screws just in the edge here. So that gets lined up. Honestly could have just taped that into place, but I'm going to probably leave those screws in once I refit it. So now I'm going to get this, obviously on the back of this is quite clean ply, so when I put this back in position, and it really does need to go back in position, so what I'm going to do is just put at least one of the screws back in place to stop it moving. So I've got that screw back in place, it's sat on the bottom, so I've got a couple of points of contact. It's not going to move much, but because I'm going to give it a thump at the top, and I don't want to create multiple holes, I'm just going to put another screw in. So now we've got that in position. It's sitting over those 2 screws, which are sort of roughly here and here. I'm just checking, I've got 2 marks, but I've got 1 decent mark there, and then the other mark there. So the next step, take this off, go in the workshop, build it up, and then we're going to come back, take the bottom panel off, and then feed the cable up. Okay, so let's imagine this is just a panel that you've made without covering it. It's definitely better to make this without covering it. The luxury of hindsight. But I've made these 2 marks. They're quite faint, so I'm just going to use centre punch and just make them a bit bigger so that there's no mistake when I line them up. So now I should be able to sort of slide this into the position and then find the position on this one. So that is my position there. This does sort of slant off that way a bit. So having got that position marked, I'm just going to trace around it, because I won't be screwing this to this panel at all. So just for all my line-up purposes, I'm going to be relying on those two markers and this line. So that's good. So now what we're wanting to do is cut out that shape, but only through my 4mm ply. I said this would get interesting. When I say interesting, I mean scary as shit, because there's a lot of work in this panel and I don't want to screw it up. There's a really good chance I might, in which case this video might not make it. I might have to redo it. So I think what I'm going to do, in order to route this shape out, it's the only way I can think of doing it, is to route it out. I'm going to need to use a bearing guided cutter with a top bearing. In order to do that, I'm going to need enough space between this and this in order to actually cut through that with the bearing sitting on that. So I need enough depth. So I'm going to use one of my 12mm bits that we provide in the kit, and I'm just going to sort of temporarily glue it to this and then go through with the router. So that's the 12mm bit that comes in the kit of parts. You probably wouldn't need to do this because you would be probably making this from scratch, but I'm just giving you some options. So I'm going to place that on there, line it up, and I think what I'm going to do is super glue this to there, and I'm also going to super glue this to this piece. I'm going to do it on bits of tape so that I can pull it off later. So not really 100% sure how this is going to work, but we'll try it. Gonna have a minor problem there. I don't really want to cut that out of there, so probably gonna flip this up the other way and just actually put that on top. As long as I view that vertically down, we should be okay. That's solid. Now all I need to do is get a router in there. It's not the best router bit, but that's going to be enough for me to drop that down. It'll catch on that top edge, which is what I want it to, and then we should be able to just go 4mm into the ply. That'll cut the ply, won't hit the foam or the vinyl. There's probably only 3mm of foam in there, maybe 4. It's going to be compressed a bit, and then I got vinyl. These routers are great for generally trimming, but accurate depth adjustment is not one of their strong points. So did I say they were great? They're a bit shit actually. Up your game, do all. So what I'm going to do here, honestly, is minute adjustment and go through a little bit at a time. I've got to go through that much because I need the bearing to be touching this outer. So just one little check to make sure that's not going to move. It's actually done it. And there wasn't much wiggle room at all. So I've just literally cut through the ply and probably 1/2 mm of the foam. I'll just hoover that out so you can see it. If I can find a hoover that sort of works. So hopefully you can pick that up. Let's just come in without camera. So you can see I've cut through the foam. That's the back of the vinyl. That's the foam. And I'm going to try and gently sort of cut the foam out. Actually, I'm not. I'm gonna cut this from the other side, but I'm going to cut it about 3 or 4mm inside, so I don't get any of the foam, or don't get the material spreading past the opening. Now I can just peel these off. So hopefully I've just got a little bit of glue on there, which we can live with. We can just sand that off if we needed to. So say all I'm going to do now is just try and cut this, but I'm going to cut it from the other side so I can see it. I'm going to leave about 5mm. If we covered this without scrim, I probably would just cut it back to the line. But because it's scrimmed, there's always a danger it's just going to sort of shrink or pull backwards. I'll just double check that the handle fits in. So I've got the handle, and then we'll just double check that squeezes in there and then goes in like that. So that works fine. So now what we're going to do, we're going to make the handle fit this. This is going to go into the van. I'm going to put the door card over this, which is in place with all of these backing plates. So we know from experience that when we've got this on the door and we've got 4mm ply, we're going to have this. Then we've got to stack up enough of these and the base plate so that they literally stack like that, but allow this to sit in and not bottom out on those. So that's going to sit there. So we need at least this much gap. So that wants to sit there. So what we've got to do is calculate the number of blocks that we use, or the combination of blocks that we use to make up at least 35, maybe 36 mil. So we've got to get 36 mil between there and there, which includes the outer plate, which includes the mounting plate, my outer finish, and these blocks. So I'm just going to put that over the edge of the table and see what we can do to get to 36 mil. That's 36.5. So I'm going to say in this case a combination of a 6 mil and two 9 mil will work. If I was just using that, I would probably swap the 6 mil for the 12 mil that I've just used for glue. The 12 mil is going to be superfluous in this case. So that can stay out. I'm going to use these. Then what I need to do is basically glue these on the back of there. And then we're going to glue this on top. So they're all stuck together there. That's going to sit on top there. So when we mount this in the van, that's going to be screwed back in the holes that it was already screwed to. This should, within a mil or so, line up on there. Then the cable's going to come out. We're going to join the cable to this. We're going to sort of insert that into there, lift this up. Hopefully there's enough play on those two screws for that to line up, and we should be good. What I'm going to do is attach this cable into that little bit of pipe. I'm going to make sure that I go through here first, save me undoing it all. I'm just going to push that into there. Put a little bit of tape over the edge, and now just carry on pushing that. Well, we're going to push this up and pull that at the same time. So now we've got the cable at the top. We can now go on to fit this. So fitting this into place. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to do it with it out here and then do the adjustment in there. So the next step is just to take this apart, take that plate off, put the end of this pin in the slot, make sure the tail end of the cable is in the groove, and then just basically get this plate, it doesn't really matter which way it goes up, put it over the adjuster, make sure it's not trapping the cable, and then do up the 4 bolts. So then you want to do up the 4 bolts. So now all I'm going to do is just put that plate in there with the 4 mil screws that fit in the existing holes. Okay, the next step is going to be to fit this panel. We're going to make sure that we push the cable through there. Put the panel in place. You may, in this case, that is a little bit thick, but it's okay. We can cope with that. So I'm not going to take any out. And then we're just going to put this panel back into the 2 screw holes I made earlier. As supplied, you should have this on the end of there. We're now going to attach the handle. We're going to locate the barrel in that slot. Then we're going to just pull a bit of tension on it. Pull that around there. and then screw the adjuster in about halfway. Doesn't really matter how far in you put it. I would say about halfway is about right, just so it's not interfering with the cam. Just nip the nut up a little bit, that'll stop it moving, and then this can go into our outer panel. That'll hold it while I attach the cables. I'm just going to push that through there, push that back, and then make sure that fits, which it should do. And then we're going to continue to put all of these screws into place. So now what I'm going to do is take the 4mm black machine screws. I think we've got a 2.5mm Allen key head, and I'm going to screw them into there, and that should tighten that down. So that's the top handle fitted in place, tightened up, and you can see it's pulled into the scrim foam that's on the back of this, so it's quite a nice look. So now what I've got to do is basically just adjust the tension here. It basically is to do with the tension that's in this cable, so it puts a little bit of tension on there and doesn't allow it to come back far enough that actually releases the lock. So what I'll do, I'll demonstrate the adjustment here. So we've got, that's tight, so it's going to pull. Shut the door. Obviously what we've done with the handle kit has got no effect on the back door handle itself at all, so that doesn't come into play. But if I lock it, so that has worked, so I've got enough slackness on it, but I'll demonstrate how if you put too much tension on it, it won't work. So if I slacken this off a little bit, sorry, if I tension this a bit too much, now I probably could only move it up and down about 5 or 6 mil. So it's locked, but I can still open the back door. Unlock, lock, I can still open the back door. So just make sure you don't put too much tension on it. So a little bit of wobble. It works. So you want to basically test the handle from the inside as well before you start putting everything back together. So shut that on that side, and then test the handle from the inside. That works. The last piece of the equation is if you leave this loose in there like it is at the moment, when you slam the door or you go over bumps, that's going to bounce around and possibly annoy you, possibly not. You probably won't hear it, but it's just one of those things that if you deal with it now, it's easier. You don't want to stuff this full of insulation because you need this to move freely and not get stuck. So what we've done is just included a little bit of Velcro, which if you just stick that around there, secure it with the opposite Velcro, now there's no bounce and no rattle. It's a minor thing, but easy to deal with at this point. I know I'm showing you a video on fitting our handle kit. Someone's probably going to ask, why haven't you filled the bottom of the door full of all the sort of fluff insulation? We've got 2 layers of an XPME foam, which is foil backed, so you've got a bit of the reflective properties, and you've got the closed cell foam, but it's not going to absorb any water. But from this point downwards on the door here, the door handle, there isn't any way of stopping water coming in the door handle, which is why you've got drain holes in the bottom. So it's our personal choice. I know a lot of people like to stuff this full of the wadding, but personally we've got mechanical parts this side, we've got water ingress. It's just easier to keep it with non-absorbent insulation materials. But that's just my take on it. So now we've got to that point, it's easy enough to put all of our door cards back, and that is just as straightforward as you would do, however you finished your door. With us, we did have a door hole, we did have a hole here for the handle. I'm now going to just patch that in with a piece from behind, which is the easiest way I can do it. I'm not going to make a whole new door panel, and it'll look fine. I'll show you the finished article once I'm done, but otherwise now it's just a case of screwing this back together, and we're good to go.